The Chilean Coup d'etat of 1973 by Ben Percifield. The time is 1973. So, where does this put us in a global context? Well, in 1973, the Cold War was in full effect. The United States fought for capitalism around the world, and the Soviet Union for communism. After World War II, President Harry S. Truman set forth a doctrine that would set the tone of the Cold War. Truman's doctrine was the policy of the United States to support free people who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressure. In short, the United States would help anyone in the world that was resisting communism. So, how does this tie into Chile? In the 1970s, Chile was led by the Marxist Salvador Allende. While everything was perfectly fine, the United States did not like that Allende was seeing red. So, what do? The United States helps with some covert and overt actions to stage a coup d'etat in Chile. In Allende's place comes the former commander-in-chief, Augusto Pinochet. This was a violent coup d'etat in two ways. The overthrow itself was pretty violent, but the after effects were even harsher. Pinochet established the government junta of Chile, which lasted for 17 years. On the day of the coup, the military officers issued an act of constitution. This act established Pinochet's military government, which immediately suspended the Constitution, suspended Congress, and imposed strict curfew and censorship laws. Pinochet effectively set up a militaristic dictatorship. As I previously said, the initial coup d'etat was rough, with tanks and airplanes having been seen bombing Allende, but the after effects were rougher. While Pinochet was the dictator of Chile, he instigated a campaign of terror on those who supported anything to be considered leftist. But this coup d'etat also meant a lot more. This coup d'etat was the end of an era. Before Pinochet's assumed control, Chile had for decades been hailed as a beacon of democracy in Latin America. After his coup d'etat, Chile became a country that was ruled by terror and corruption. The coup d'etat of 1973 effectively shut democracy out of Chile for at least 17 long, terrifying years. During his militaristic rule, Pinochet made sure that his country agreed with his agenda. Simply put, human rights were not guaranteed during his rule. Although he would eventually be charged for hundreds of human rights violations from 1973 to 1990, many Chileans lived in fear. Political opponents of Pinochet's regime were tortured and murdered. In total, Pinochet's junta killed at least 3,200 people and tortured another 29,000. The overwhelming majority of those tortured and murdered were done so in 1973, the year that Pinochet assumed control of Chile. Another 200,000 Chileans were forced to go into exile. In 1990, although Pinochet stepped down peacefully as the head of the government junta of Chile, he still remained in power. Pinochet assumed the commander-in-chief position of the Chilean army. It wasn't until 1998 that Augusto Pinochet was put on trial for about 300 criminal charges. His charges ran from tax evasion to embezzlement, but were mostly for the multiple human rights violations during his authoritarian rule. All in all, the Chilean coup d'etat of 1973 was a devastating event in the grand scope of Chile's history. Led by the aggressive Augusto Pinochet, this coup d'etat overthrew a subtly Marxist government, but then instantiated a violent regime that terrorized its citizens for decades. This has been Ben Percifield reporting, IGS, Interglobal Graded Studies School. Thank you.